We're going to continue our conversation about your money. Now, I know I met a couple people that were here for the first time, and that's how it always works out, right? You show up to a church for the first time, and of course, they're talking about finances. And like Tony said last week, this isn't something we talk a lot about around here, but it's something that's incredibly important. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've realized, my money always is talking to me. You know what it's always saying? It's saying goodbye, right? I don't know if you guys deal with that at all, but so I think if it's always saying that to us, it's only fair that we talk about it some as well. But the reality is, and I think we all know this, is that finances are incredibly difficult. And in our culture and in our world, a lot of people struggle a lot financially. 56% of households live paycheck to paycheck. Some statistics even have it higher than that. Federal Reserve recently released some data that said 40% of households couldn't get a hold of $400 cash quickly if they needed it for an emergency. Marriages. The number one thing married couples fight about, it's the number one or two reason they divorce, is because of money issues and money challenges. And so finances are a huge part of our life. And I think actually probably in churches we should talk more about finances than we do, because people are struggling financially. And it's such a big part. Think about when you go to work, you give up your life, you give up time, portions of your life, big portions of your life in exchange for money. And then you can do things with that money. And it's such a big part of how we live and how we function in our culture. And the Bible actually has a whole lot to say about finances. There's over 2,300 verses that talk about money and possessions. Jesus, 2/3 of his teachings and his parables related to money and possessions. And so the Bible has a whole lot to say. So as Christians, we have an advantage, because the book that we build our lives on, the book that is the basis, the foundation of our faith, actually addresses finances and possessions and our resources a whole lot. And so I think this is something that we can not just survive in, but we can actually thrive in if we follow what God has to say for us. And so last week we started this conversation, Tony talked about it, and what he said is so true, is when we talk about finances, we're not really talking about money, but we're really talking about heart issues, aren't we? Because your money is so closely tied to your heart. Like if you want to know what someone values, if you go up to someone and you say, what's important to you, or what do you value? They'll give you an answer. But if you want to get an accurate picture of what someone values, there's three things you can look at. You could look at their calendar. Like, what is it you spend time doing? What is it you say yes to? What are the obligations and commitments you have? It's good to think about for yourself, because that shows your values. You could look at their electronics, their phone, their computer. What apps do they use? What kind of videos do they watch? What kind of music do they listen to? What's on their browser history? What have they been researching and reading about? Right? That tells you a lot about a person. That'll give you some insight into what's important in their life. And then there's the bank account. What do they spend money on? What do they give to? What expenses do they have? What obligations do they have? Because that tells you something about their values and what they really view as being important. And so today we're going to continue this conversation and explore this idea that money is related to our heart, because there's several principles in Scripture that build upon that. And today I want to introduce a word that if you've been around church a lot, you've heard it a lot, because we use it. It's Christianese. We use it in churches a lot, but outside of church you probably haven't used it much. And the word is stewardship. I think about when was the last time you used the word stewardship in conversation with someone outside of church? You're single people, you really want to impress someone, you use the word stewardship, right? It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. But stewardship simply means, it's a church word, but it simply means it's just the managing or supervising or taking care of something. And so if you're a steward, you have something that belongs to someone else that you care for, that you watch over, that you manage. And in the Bible, stewardship is very closely related to lordship. And lordship is just this idea that God is Lord over everything. That Jesus is in charge of every area of our life. Psalm 42 says this: the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who are in it belong to Him. Right? So as Christians, when we step into faith with Jesus, one of the commitments we're making, one of the decisions we're making is that, Jesus, you are Lord of my life. You're in charge of everything. And as Christians, we recognize that everything we have belongs to God, or at least that's what the Bible teaches. And so it changes how you start to think about things. For example, your house. When you view it through the lens of stewardship or lordship, you think, God, you gave me this house. It belongs to you. How should I use it? Do I open it up to my neighbors? Should I host a life group in it? All right, if you want to host a life group, talk to Tana. Right, those are going to be starting up here soon. But how should I use my house? My job. God, my manager is really difficult, and sometimes I get extremely frustrated at my job, but God, you've put me here, and I have this opportunity. Like, how should I use my job, my time at my job, to advance your kingdom? God, you've entrusted it to me. How can I be a good manager, a steward of that? My children. You only have 18 years with them in your home. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit longer, but right, like 18, 20, 25 years, however long it is, it goes fast. It goes fast, doesn't it? How should I raise my kids? What should I point them towards? How should I invest in them? How do I spend time with them? What values do I teach them? Right? The people around me. Some of you are going back to school soon. You're going to have some classmates. You're going to have a locker, and there's going to be some people on the other side of your locker, your coworkers, your teammates, for those of you that are on teams. God, you've put these people, these relationships in my life. How should I interact with them? How do you want me to influence them? That's looking at it through the lens of stewardship, and of course your money. God, you've given me $1,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $5,000. God, these resources I have, these are ultimately yours. How do I handle them? How do I manage them for you? Is there any area of your life where you don't view Jesus as Lord, or you don't see yourself as a steward? When you think about your dreams for the future, are those in God's hands, or are those your dreams? If you're single and you really don't want to be single, do you entrust that area of your life to God? Here's another way of thinking about it. Let's think finances for a minute. Let's say your life was a business, and so mine would be Scott Incorporated, or it might be Carson Incorporated, right? Or Tana Incorporated, or Tony and Lori Incorporated, and you looked at how you were managing your resources, your financial resources. You were on the outside looking in. Now, don't answer this, but would you fire you? Right? Like, how are you doing in that area? Are you a good steward? Are you a good manager of those resources? I heard this story once about this guy. He was in his mid-30s. He'd worked in the hotel industry most of his life. And he was interviewing for a GM position at this hotel. And so he was talking with the owner, and he was prepared. He had a good resume. He had a lot of experience. And so he was at the hotel having this conversation, doing the interview with her, and he prepared for it. And she was, she was super nice, super friendly, and the interview was going really, really well. And so then, after the interview's done, they do a tour of the property, and they go up and they look at the suites, and they walk around see some of the rooms, and she shows him the workout area, and the lobby area, and the breakfast area, and the outside pool, and it's all going really well. And then they get outside, they do an outside tour of the property, and he's feeling really good about this. He's like, I think I'm going to get this job, right? I'm going to get this gig, and be the GM, which he hasn't been yet. And they get up to the front, where people drop off and pick up people. And then she asks this question. She's like, could you show me your car? And he's like, I guess. It's right over there. And it was just a very normal sedan, nothing fancy. And she's like, okay. She's like, I'd like to see it. And so he takes it over, and she's like, could I see inside of it? And he's like, yeah, I have my keys here. And so he pulls out his keys, unlocks the doors, and opens them for her. And she looks in, and she's like, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. He closes the doors, and she's like, well, I appreciate you coming out. This has been a good conversation. However, I don't think you're the right fit to be the GM of my hotel. And I don't, I just don't think it's probably the best fit. And he's stunned. I don't know if you've ever interviewed for something or been pursuing something you just thought was yours, like you were a perfect fit for it. That's how this guy felt. And so he's kind of flabbergasted, and he's like, why? Like, what's wrong? Like, I felt like I have a good resume, I have everything you need. Like, where was the disconnect? She's like, I agree with everything you said. However, when you showed me your car, like on the inside of it, there was a fast food bag on the floor, and it was kind of a mess. And if that's how you take care of your car, I'm not going to entrust my hotel to you and my property to you. It's a stewardship issue, right? She's saying, like, if I can't trust this, or if you can't take care of this thing of yours, why would I want to give something much larger and more responsibility to you? And it's a stewardship thing. Because here's the thing about money. You know what money does? Is it makes you more of what you already are, doesn't it? It makes you more of what you already are. I mean, so often we fall in this trap of thinking, like, man, if I just get a little bit more money, everything will be fine. If I just get that bonus, if I just get that promotion, if I just get those extra benefits at that new job, if I just get that stimulus check, that child tax care credit, that's starting to show up. Like, if I just get that, everything's going to be changed. And how often is that true? Almost never, is it? Because what more money does is it makes you more of what you already are. And so if you're irresponsible with what you have now, you know what more money is going to do? It's going to make you more irresponsible. If you're kind of a jerk and greedy now, you know what more money is going to do? It's going to make you more greedy and more of a jerk, right? If you're generous now, you know what more money is going to do? It's going to make you more generous. Money makes you more of what you already are. Money is like an amplifier. Any audio files, like audio people, what's an amplifier do? It makes it louder, right? It takes a signal, and you put it through an amplifier, and you can then power a speaker or power speakers with it. Now, an amplifier doesn't change the signal. Like, I wish it would. Wouldn't it be cool if you put in country music and you got out rock? Like, that would be awesome, right? I mean, rock's so much better than country, right? That would be awesome. That's not what an amplifier does, though, does it? What's it do? It amplifies it. It takes a low-gain signal, it gives it gain, and it makes it powerful enough to power speakers. And that's what money is. Money is like an amplifier. It takes what you already are, and it makes you more of it. Money makes you more of what you already are. And so when we think about the almost 6/10 of households that are living paycheck to paycheck, and you ask why is that? It's usually because people are disorganized or impulsive or don't have a plan. And so what's more money going to do? It's going to make people more disorganized, more impulsive, living without a plan. And as Christians, what we do is we spiritualize it. We're kind of messy with our finances. We get ourselves in trouble. I don't know if you do this, but I've done it before. But you get yourself in trouble, and then you pray, like God, I'm in this mess. Could you rescue me? Could you give me some money? Right? Help get me out of this. It'd just make everything better if I just had a bonus or more pay, more money. And I wonder what God says to that. I wonder if sometimes our financial lack of stewardship or mismanagement actually interferes with some of our prayers. There's a story in Matthew 25. It's called the Parable of the Talents. Those of you that have been in church for a while, you know this. And I'd encourage you to read it this week. But what happens is Jesus tells a story, and there's this master, and he has 3 servants. And he's getting ready to go on a trip, and so he takes his 3 servants, and he gives them each a bag of money. He splits up his money and gives it to them. Now, he gives them different amounts, and when you read this, the emphasis isn't on the amount. And so when we talk about stewardship and we talk about being a good manager, this isn't just for people that have lots of money. It doesn't matter if you're at the poverty level or if you're a multimillionaire. It doesn't matter if you have a little bit or a lot, right? Because these servants, this teaching Jesus is giving, they all have, the 3 people have different amounts that is entrusted to them. And so he goes off on this trip, and then he comes back from his trip after he's been gone a while, and he talks to each of the servants, and he's like, how's it going with what I gave to you? Now, 2 of the servants did a good job. Like they were good stewards. They were good managers of what was entrusted to them. And the third one, didn't do such a good job. He kind of blew it. Like he didn't follow the wishes of the master. Like he didn't follow what his master wanted. Now, you kind of, what you want him to say is like, oh, let me give you another chance, or here's a little bit more, go try again. But that's not what he does. He actually takes what that servant that didn't steward it well, didn't manage it well, he takes that and he gives it to the other one. And something inside of me is like, man, maybe that doesn't feel right. But then here's what he says to the steward that did well. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. You have been a good steward of a little bit, so I'm going to now entrust you with more. This is a hotel, right? This guy, like you've been taking care of a little bit of your own stuff well, I want to give you more. My son turns 15 this year, towards the end of the year. So that means in the next year, we're going to have driver's ed. We're going to have a learner's permit. So watch out, right? So he's going to be driving more. Now we've done some driving, mainly in the church parking lot when none of you are here. But we've done some driving. I think he's going to do awesome at it. I know he will. But I also remember what I was like when I was 15. And I remember just thinking, how I was ready to drive before I was really ready to drive. And I know there's going to come times this year, and when he turns 16 and he just starts driving and having his license, where he's going to want to do more than we feel comfortable with him doing. He's going to be like, Dad, I want to drive to the other side of the other part of India, on the other side of the city. And we're like, no. Like, not driven much on the interstate yet. Or no, we're going on this trip, and like, I want to drive part of the trip. I was like, I don't know, But so I know that's going to happen. Now, as a loving father, what do? Do I just throw him the keys and say, go for it? No, right? Why? Because that'd be irresponsible. He could hurt someone. He could hurt himself. He could kill someone. He could kill himself. As a loving father, if he's not yet proven himself, if he's not yet shown that he's responsible with a little bit that I've given him, would I give him more freedom and more flexibility and just tell him to take the car? No, because that's not what a loving father does. And you see, God's the same way when it comes to an area like finances. Like he gives us, we all have different amounts, right? It doesn't matter the amount, but we've all been given something. How are we stewarding that? How are we managing that? Now, let me just say this, because I know finances, there's lots of guilt, and there's lots of shame, and there's lots of condemnation, and in Christ there's no condemnation, and so I just want to be real clear, because I know there's people in here. If the statistics are true, like over half of this room is struggling financially. Like that's normal in our world, right? And so I don't want you to hear this and think like, man, and just feel really guilty and shameful about it, because this has nothing to do with your relationship with God. You can be a financial mess. You can live your entire life as a financial mess, and God still loves you, and God is still passionate about you, and God is still pursuing you. And some of you are here today for the very first time, and you're here, and you may not even know why you're here, or you just felt like you should come into church, or you've never followed God or given Jesus much thought, but something inside of you said, you know what, I should jump online and watch, I should attend. And what I want you to hear is finances have nothing to do with God, how God loves you, how God pursues you, the plans God has for your life. Right? You can spend your entire life, and when you die one day, and we're all going to die, and we're all going to stand before God, every one of us, and God's going to look at you, and He is not going to say, show me your budget. He's not going to say, show me how much was in your bank account. Show me how financially responsible you are. He's not going to say any of that. He's going to ask you one question. He's going to say, how did you respond to Jesus? Like, what did you do with my son, Jesus? That's all that ultimately matters. That's all that really matters. And so when you think about relationships with God and God pursuing you and loving you and forgiving you and working in your life, like God, like none of that matters with how you're doing financially. However, if that's the case, then why does the Bible have 2,300 verses on finances and possessions? Why did 2/3 of Jesus' teachings have to relate to finances and possessions? Because as a loving Father who is crazy about you, as a loving Father who has incredible plans for your life, He knows the reality that we live in. And He doesn't want financial mismanagement. He doesn't want you being overwhelmed by debt. He doesn't want you not being able to sleep at night. He doesn't want those things to interfere the very best He has for your life. And He knows as humans, finances are a big part of our lives. And so He's like, I want to teach them a lot about finances. I want to talk about this in my word because I want them to get this. I want them to be victorious. I want them to have freedom, financial freedom. I want them to win in this area of life, because if they do, they can experience the very best of life that I have for them. It's what a loving father would do. It's what you do for your kids. You look at areas of their life that you know they're going to struggle with, that are a big part of their life, and you teach them about them. You talk to them about them, right? You help them with that. And God, your loving Father, is the same way. God has incredible plans for your life. And He doesn't want finances to get in the way of those. After I graduated college, I went to a private school. I had over $50,000 of student loan debt. Now, I'm older than a lot of you, and so even back then it was even more than you think about, like that much money now. And, student loans is how people did things, right? Like, it was normal. And so I was a college kid. What did I know? And I was just racking it up. And so I got out, and I didn't think a whole lot about it because I had an okay job, and the monthly payment was pretty low. I came to Christ in college, and so when I came out of college, I was just I was passionate about Jesus. I was going on mission trips, and I was serving in my church, and I was single, and I had so much free time. Like, single people, like, you guys have so much free time. It's just amazing, and I remember that, and I was like, I just want to give it all to God. God, whatever you have, wherever you send me, whatever you want me to do, I will do. And I was sitting in the service kind of like this, and I was hearing a message kind of like this, and I remember having this thought, I have over $50,000 of debt. God, if you call me to walk away from everything and go across the world and do something on the mission field or to do some type of ministry, like full-time, like, I can't do it. Because I have all these obligations. I have this stuff. Like, I'm in a mess financially right now, and I've got to get out of this. Like, I am not free. Like, I have this weight. The Bible says the borrower is slave to the lender, right? I was a slave. And there was this reality, almost a fear of, like, a weightiness of, like, I don't want to be a slave. I want to get out of this mess because I want to be free. I want to pursue whatever God lays in front of me or calls me to. Like, I don't want my finances and my financial mismanagement holding me back. And it took a couple years, but like that was my goal, was to become debt free and to get out of the mess so I could be free. And that's what God wants for you. He has incredible things stored up for you. And he wants to help you have victory and freedom in this area of finances. So stewardship. God has called us to be a good manager of what he's entrusted to us. Now I want to spend the rest of the time there's a real practical tool that helps you be a good steward. Now I'm going to warn you, when I say this word, some of you are going to revulse, right? And some of you are going to think it's a swear word or a cuss word because you've heard it used in that way and you've been beat up over the head with it, or you've tried it and you realize it doesn't work. But it's a really simple tool that allows you, and I would actually suggest that is required for you to be a good steward. And the word is budget. All right, budget. Right? To be a good steward, I want to suggest to you that you have to live on a written budget. I would actually say that you cannot be a great steward without a written budget. And I want to challenge those of you that are financially well off, because I know there's some of you that have already checked out and said, this is not for me because I'm doing well financially. And I want to gently challenge you that even if you have a lot of resources, a budget is just as important for you to be a great steward and to be intentional and to manage the resources God's entrusted to you as it is for someone that's struggling financially, right? Because you have to have a plan for your money. That's what a budget is. It's a plan, right? There's only 3 things you can do with money. Like, I teach my kids this. I taught them, we taught them when they were young. There's 3 things you can do with money, right? You can spend money, you can save money, and you can give money. I mean, that's all. There's not a whole lot you can do with your money. You can spend, save, and give. And what a budget does is it gives you a plan for you on to how to spend, save, and give. Budget. Jesus talked about budgeting. I don't know if you knew Jesus talked about budgeting. Because here's what Jesus knew. Is that if you don't have control of your money will control you. Think about it. For those of you that have at some point, which is probably all of us, or are right now, struggling financially, is it hard sometimes to sleep at night when you're in a financial struggle? It is, isn't it? Is it hard to be at peace when collectors are calling? It is. I've experienced that, right? Like, it's hard. And see, Jesus knew this. He wants you to be at peace. He wants you to sleep well at night. God does. Right? If you don't have a plan for your money, if you don't have control of your money will control you. If you don't have a plan for your money, someone else will. Now, there are all kinds of marketers and product managers and companies and organizations that have plans for your money. And if you don't have a plan for it, someone else's plan will come to fruition. And they won't steal it from you necessarily. Sometimes they'll try, but they won't steal you, but they'll coerce you and they'll manipulate you to give your money to them if you don't have a plan. And so what a budget is it's just a plan. And so Jesus, he talked about this, right? In Luke 14, he gives this example. He says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? You know what he's saying when he says estimate the cost? You know what that is? That's a budget, right? You're going to do a big project. It's a budget. Churches, when they do building projects, they have budgets for it. Organizations, companies, they submit annual budgets, right? Their board of directors, shareholders require it. You would never be able to be in charge of a business or a company if you didn't operate from a budget. So he says, one of you wants to go build a tower. Like, what are you going to do first? You're going to budget. You're going to estimate the cost to see if you have enough. Because what happens? Because if you don't and you lay the foundation, you're not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you. The person who began to build wasn't able to finish. It's interesting Jesus talks about ridicule because that's like the emotional part of money. And it's hard, isn't it? Like when you've made financial mistakes to talk about it. It's embarrassing, like kind of when you're in a mess or you've done something poorly. You know, some of you spouses, like you make a choice and you have a hard time talking to your spouse about a financial mistake. A lot of parents don't talk to their kids about money. And we wonder, why is it then they become adults and they move out of the house and they're a financial mess? Like, well, you never revealed anything to them when they were young. So when your kids are young, as they get older, increasingly more and more, talk to them about your finances. Show them, how you manage things. Help teach them. Now Jesus here, I want to be clear, like this, he was talking about the cost of discipleship. That's what Luke 14 is about. If you read it in context, he's talking about the cost of being a follower of his. That, being a Christian isn't all rainbows and unicorns, right? Like there's a cost to following Jesus, and that's what he's talking about. But it's interesting, isn't it, that he uses a financial example to help make his point. 2,000 years ago, those people that were listening and hanging out with Jesus, they had the same financial challenges we have. They had money. They never had enough of it. It was always saying goodbye to them. They're always trying to figure out, where do I spend it? How do I use it wisely? And so he uses these financial stories and examples. Proverbs 27. Be sure to know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. That's the budgeting part, right? Like know what you have. Know the state of it, right? Why? Because the next few verses. For riches do not endure forever. Some of it will disappear. Some of the money will go out. Crown is not secure for all generations. When the hay is removed and new growth appears and the grass from hills is gathered in, you have increase. You'll spend. You have increase. The lambs will provide you with clothing and goats with the price of the field. So he says, if you do this, right? If you know the condition of your flock, if you budget, verse 27, you will have plenty of goat's milk to feed your family. And so Scripture is very clear that to be a good steward, we've got to be intentional and be a good manager. And to be a good manager, a budget's the tool to do it. Now here's the good news, is every one of us can do it. There's nothing special you need. You don't have to have a certain education. You don't have to have any certain tools. So let me just I'm just going to give you quick 4 guidelines that Courtney and I, that we figured out as we've been budgeting and as I read about this in Scripture. So here's just my challenge to you is, if you're not budgeting, is to start. And if you are, and maybe you get kind of sloppy, like sometimes we get kind of sloppy with it, is like this be a call to refocus, because we all have the call of stewardship. God's calling all of us to be wise managers. So here's my 4 guidelines. Number 1 is write it down on paper. Like write it down. It can't be in your head. Like some of you are sitting here thinking right now, like I think I kind of have this figured out. No. Write it down on paper. Right? You're going to write down what your income is and your expenses and what you want to save and what you want to get. You got to write it down. You don't need any tools. You don't need a spreadsheet. Some of you right now, you're getting excited because you're like, I can create a spreadsheet out of this and I'll have colors, right? Some of you are looking at your spouses right now. You're like, I know you're going to love doing this. You can do that, but you don't have to start there, right? Just start simple. Get a piece of paper and a pencil. That's all you need, right? Write it down. Second guideline is do it before the month begins, right? It's good. We're coming to the end of a month, and so you can do it for the new month, right? There's a new month starting. Or do it for this next pay cycle, whatever it is, right? You can do it before. Because if you wait to after, the money's already leaving. Like the money's already going out. And you want to be ahead of that, right? So write it down. Do it before the month begins. Married people, do it together. This message today could save marriages, right? If the data is true, people that are married in this room, The majority of you, if there are struggles, if you are having struggles and frustrations, it's likely around money. Right? Do it together. Now, if you're married, this doesn't apply to you, but when you're married and you combine your finances and your checking accounts and all that, two become one, you budget together. Why? Why is this so important? Number one, it forces you to communicate. It forces you to communicate. And as Tony talked about, money is tied to our heart. And so when you start talking about how you're going to spend your money, what you're really talking about is, what do you value? What's important to us? Like, what do we want to prioritize? And it causes you to communicate at a deeper level than maybe you normally do. Now, here's how it works, right? One of the spouses is going to be the detail-oriented nerd. They're already excited about doing a budget and talking about it. They're like, Scott told us to do this. See? They're excited about it. And the other one is more of the free spirit. All right, so here's how it works. Nerd, you've got to give your spouse permission, and you can't come up with the whole budget yourself. You can come up with 80% of it and then meet together and talk about it, but you got to give your spouse input. You got to give them, and you're going to change things based on what they say. Free spirit. You cannot just say, yeah, whatever you say. You can't say that, right? You cannot abdicate your role. You are a steward just as much as your nerd spouse is a steward of this, right? And so you have got to say, no, this is important because my spouse cares about it, number one. God cares about it, number two. And Scott said we should do it, number three, right? So we're going to do this. And you're going to sit down and just, it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be because the nerds probably has a lot of it ready. And what's going to happen too is one of you is going to be a spender and one of you is a saver. That's okay. And you're going to come to the table and you're going to have to come and see eye to eye and you each make trade-offs. You do it together. This can strengthen your marriage. I remember Courtney and I, shortly after we got married, we went through a class and we started we had both brought debt into the marriage, and we just wanted to clean things up and be responsible. And every month we do a budget. We do a budget, and we have conversations occasionally. And it's a lot simpler now than it was before because after you do it a while, it gets easier. But it's an important part of our relationship to be on the same page because we don't want to be having constant money fights and tension over finances. So you write it down on paper, do it before the month begins, do it together, and then do it again next month. Right? You do it again next month. Because here's what's going to happen. Especially if it's your first time doing it, it's not going to work well. There's just things you don't know, there's surprises, you may blow it, and that's okay. And there's no perfect budget. I remember when we first started doing this, I came up with this perfect budget. I was ready to print it out and post it on the wall because it was the perfect budget that would work for us. And you know what I realized? It never worked. Because every month's different. A bunch of you families have kids going back to school. And you have expenses this month that you're not going to have 2 months from now. And the summer is different than the fall, which is different than the spring when your kids are in sports. And December is different, right? But one of the cool things is if you budget now, you can start thinking about that. For those of you getting child tax care credits, think about if you just set aside $100 every month. That's 6 months. That's sitting there. And so maybe this Christmas, instead of going into credit card debt, you could take some of the extra you're getting and prepare for that. Because Christmas happens every December, I promise you. Right? It's every December. But when you budget, you start to think about these things, and you start to look ahead. But you're going to do it every month. Right? And you're going to learn. And I promise you, month 2 is going to be better than month 1, and month 5 is going to be a whole lot better than month 2 was. And you're going to do it again. And as you're doing this, you're connecting closer with your spouse. As you're doing this, you're becoming a better steward of the resources God's entrusted you, and you're going to find freedom, and you're going to eventually, and for some of you, it's a long journey, and that's okay. It's okay. It doesn't matter where you're at right now. What matters is where you're headed. And God has incredible plans for your life, and He wants you to fully experience all of those.